Hey, Mike Lake here with altobone.com, and I've had people recently ask how I get the recorded sound I get off of the alto trombone. And a while back, Bob McChesney asked me the same thing, how do I get the sound I get? And he's obviously no stranger to recording trombone, so I figured there was some value in sharing what goes through my mind and what I use to record my trombone. And if you want to hear recent recordings, go to altobone.com, put your email address on the homepage, and then every month you'll get a brand new finished piece of music from what I'm calling the Electric Project. And with that, I promise you'll hear the trombone playing music unlike anything you've heard. So enter your email on the homepage, and I promise you no spam, no BS, just fresh music every month. Okay, so let me start off by saying this is not to try and show you how to sound like Mike Lake, because you don't want to sound like Mike Lake, you want to sound like you. But I think some of the choices I make, the equipment I use, how I route things, I think it may give you some good ideas on getting closer to the ideal sound that you hear in your head when you record trombone, or any instrument actually. So let's start with the equipment. This has come from a lot of trial and error, a lot of testing, but I've kind of settled on my go-to signal flow and equipment. So that starts with the microphone. My primary mic is a Neumann M149 tube mic. You know, it has lots of presence and a good mid to high end, which ends up picking up the higher overtones of the alto trombone. That signal goes into a Joe Meek VC2 mic preamp. Notice the trend here, tubes in both the mic and the preamp. They help warm up the sound because it's easy to sound digital in the end, so I combat that with a warmer signal that's entering into the A to D converter. Now, a couple years ago, I upgraded my converter and it made a big difference. Right now I use a Universal Audio Apollo 16. It's got 16 in, 16 outs. It really does a nice job. The converter, or the Apollo in this case, is what translates what comes out of the mic pre to something the computer can read. It translates the analog signal into digital. Now that digital signal then goes into Logic with all my audio and my MIDI. Logic is where I do all my compositional and mixing work. Okay, we got the equipment straightened out. Now let's play. And what I want to talk about is mic proximity, how close or far from the mic you are, and the position as well. All that stuff plays a role in what it sounds like. And there's good reason to be farther away or closer. With the new music I'm putting together, I'm experimenting with really close mic proximity. And I've got my preamp cranked so that I'm on the verge of distortion if I'm not careful. But what I like about it is it's much more intimate. It allows me to do much more subtle articulation things. So listen to this. I'm going to go various distances for the mic. And it's not just a loudness thing. See if you can hear the change in character of the sound, the more intimate part of it. Now, if you're listening on computer speakers, it may be a little subtle for you, but in a full mix, it can be pretty substantial. So this is what it might sound like. Right, hopefully you can hear that. Now, let's play it in with a real mix. I've created a loop and a little bit of a melody on top of it. So here's what the trombone sounds like sitting on top of the mix, and I'm going to, again, vary the distance to the mic. Again, especially with the mix, it's probably sounding subtle, but you should experiment and see what different, how close you might get, what that sounds like, and if you like it. So now that we've recorded the tune, now let's make the trombone sound better. I do this through software plugins in Logic. In this case, it'll be EQ, compression, and reverb. So let's start with EQ. Now notice the display. That's showing us the frequency of the trombone as it plays. And I'll remove some of the bottom down here, some of the low energy that makes it sound boomy. And then I'll slightly increase the higher overtones around 2.3K, and that'll give it a little more presence. Next, I'll add a little compression to slightly reduce the contrast between the peaks and the value of the volume, levels it out a little bit. Now that meter is showing us the reduction of gain at the higher volumes of the trombone line. I'll bring up the overall gain to increase the level and to make up for the reduction of the peaks. Last, I'll use my go-to reverb, which is the Lexicon 224, and I've set it for large hall, and I'll increase the pre-delay so that the attack of the note is a little bit more present, a little cleaner, and I'll raise the high frequency decay a little bit, again, to give it a little more presence on the reverb. Okay, here's the trombone sound in the mix without EQ, compression, and reverb. And here's with it. Now the settings I just used are going to be different for you. They're going to be different for me based on what I'm recording. This is not a one-size-fits-all type of thing. Mixing is a complicated process because there's so many variables and it all depends. But hopefully this is giving you some things to think about when you do your own recording. If you're in someone else's session, obviously there's fewer variables you can control. But in your own recording, hopefully this is giving you some things to think about so that you can get closer to your ideal sound on the trombone. Thanks.